Welcome to the Agoura Hills City Council meeting. This meeting is being conducted in person in the council chambers and also by utilizing video conferencing. All attendees in the council chambers will be required to follow current state and county public health guidelines. Please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices and do not access Zoom during the live meeting, as it will cause interference with the audiovisual system in the council chambers. Tonight's meeting may be viewed on Zoom via the link on the agenda, by live stream on YouTube by entering Agoura Hills City Council meeting in your browser and clicking on the link for February 8th, 2023, or view the live or archived meeting on the city's website at agourahillscity.org and click on the Watch Meetings Online button. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. There will be an opportunity for the public to speak on any item listed on the agenda. Any person in the council chambers who wishes to speak or submit a written comment is requested to complete a public comment card for each item and submit to the city clerk prior to the public comment portion of the item. Comments submitted at the meeting will be provided to the City Council for review and filed with the official record. For any person participating remotely, written public comments were requested to be emailed by 4 p.m. today and distributed to the City Council in advance of the meeting. To request to speak during public comment, please click on the Raise Hand button on the Zoom toolbar. Request to speak must be received prior to the mayor closing the public comment portion of the item. Public testimony for all speakers is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Written public comments will not be read aloud by the city clerk. For full details, please refer to the public participation section on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call this meeting to order, and I will defer to Cub Scout Pack 227 to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Color Guard advance. Hand salute. Those not in uniform, please put your right hand over your heart. Please say with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. Color Guard, post the colors. Color Guard salute. 2. Color Guard dismissed. The audience may be seated.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Cub Scout Pack 227 for that great ceremony. If we could give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. We'll now go for a roll call. I'll defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Here.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Here.
Councilmember Wolf?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Here.
Mayor Anstead?
Here.
Mayor Anstead, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now turn to report of closed session. I'll defer to City Attorney Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Direction was given to staff. No reportable action taken this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for the approval of the agenda. Will the maker of the motion and second to approve the agenda state your names?
Councilmember Buckley Weber moves to approve tonight's agenda.
Councilmember Sylvester seconds.
Thank you. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you. There are no presentations today, so I'll move right into kind of intergovernmental special purpose committee reports. Are there any reports from staff? No. All right. Are there any reports from the city council? Anybody? Okay. Now we'll move into public comments. This section is reserved for persons wishing to speak on items not listed on the agenda that are under the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. For council chamber attendees, please submit a public comment card to the city clerk. For Zoom attendees, please click the raised hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Persons addressing the council shall not engage in disorderly conduct that disrupts or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I'll now defer to the city clerk for public comments.
Thank you. We have not received any written public comments. However, we have an in-person speaker, Douglas Wayne. If you please step up to the podium and feel free to adjust the microphone. Thank you.
I love Scouts, and I love Cubs. They were fantastic, weren't they? That was the best. I hate following them. But I'm new to the area. My name is Douglas Wayne. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit 501c3 public charity. It is called Youth Alert USA. And what we do is that we have a youth peace campaign. We just moved from Kentucky, by the way, but I'm from Jersey. And we promote this youth peace campaign 2 ways. First, we have something called special consultative status at the United Nations. So we bother all the delegates and the missions with embassies for promoting youth peace in their countries. And what we also do is a school-based program for youth that gives them the skill set to be peaceful. It's both education and skills training. And we've done over 10,000 youth so far in a lot of different cities, New York, Chicago, and now we're starting in Agoura Hills in California. We teach them equality, kindness, because we're always telling people, we're always telling them not to do, but we have to instruct them on how to be kind and how to treat people as equal. And then we cover the gamut from gun violence to gang violence to domestic violence to any kind of violence. It's all interconnected. And the one little twist that we have, we follow it's a model practice, but that the U.S. Department of Justice is the only practice that's rated effective. It's at crimesolutions.gov. So we follow that practice, so it is effective in reducing violence. It's like a step ahead of social emotional learning. It's like the next generation. And our twist that we put on it is that it's adults and youth where we meet equally. It's always never doesn't go over good, but adults do have the violence, and youth do have the violence. It certainly is condensed into there and in their young years. So we practice what we preach. We think the greatest lesson is that there's an adult in person treating them equal kindness on really what we think is the head of the snake. Violence, bullying, abuse, we think is the head of snake of all problems that youth have. So I just we got an email with a little grant thing that we're probably going to fill out. So I thought I'd put a name with the face since we live down the street. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have no further in-person speaker cards. I'll now defer to staff for any remote participants. Amber?
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. I will now move to the consent calendar. This section is reserved for persons wishing to speak on items on the consent calendar. For council chamber attendees, please submit a public comment card to the city clerk. For Zoom attendees, please click the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk for public comments.
Thank you. No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted. We'll now defer to staff for any remote participants.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the city council on the consent calendar? Okay. I will now call for a motion and a second to adopt the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar. This is Deborah Klein Lopez. Councilmember Wolf will second.
Thank you. Now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez,
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester,
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber,
Aye.
Mayor Anstead.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you. Our next item is a discussion to receive and file update on the project study report, project development for the Canaan Corridor Safety Operations and Capacity Enhancement Project. I will now defer to the Public Works Director, City Engineer Jessica Forte, for the staff presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and honorable council members. This evening, excuse me, there we go. Evening, in conjunction with our consultant team from Michael Baker International, staff is on the Canaan Road Corridor project. Canaan is easily the city's most well-traveled. Interchange of Canaan and the 101 was completed in 2006, and since that time, may I ask,
Yeah, Ms. Forte, you're coming in and out here in the chambers.
can you hear me? I apologize. Me now? I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Anstead and council members. Jessica, thank you. Thank you for starting it at least. Erica, can we start the presentation? Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. All right. The bulk of the presentation tonight will concentrate on the build alternatives that were submitted to Caltrans in October of 2022. To begin, actually it was to begin the project initiation document phase for final approval of the PSR. MBI and staff have worked to develop 3 build alternatives, which incorporated feedback received from council in November of 2021. But before we get into the build alternatives, we would like to give a brief project overview to refresh our memories of the project's purpose and design objectives. Next slide, please. The primary purpose and design objectives of the project are, 1, to improve safe conveyance and operations of regional and local access for multiple modes of transportation along the Canaan Corridor, and 2, to improve the consistency of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Next slide, please. Canaan Corridor is one of the most highly traveled roadways in all of Conejo Valley. Daily, the corridor carries upwards to 40,000 vehicles. The Canaan Corridor presents daily safety and operational challenges for motorists from not only the city of Agoura Hills, but both Los Angeles and Ventura counties, and those attending schools in the Las Virgenes and Oak Park school districts. Canaan Road serves as one of the few direct connections to points popular destinations in the Santa Monica Mountains, as well as coastal beaches along the PCH. And, of course, the Canaan Corridor has a direct impact to conveyance of traffic to and from the US 101 freeway. Over the years, the city has administered and completed surveys, studies, and improvement projects along the corridor, all seeking to improve traffic flow. Oops, we lost our... The task to find ways to reduce congestion along the corridor is challenging and very complicated. The city has reiterated their commitment to improving the Canaan Road by undertaking the Canaan Corridor Safety, Operations, and Capacity Enhancement Project, and it's been included as part of Metro's Long-Range Transportation Plan and receives Measure R and M funds. In 2017, the city awarded a professional service agreement to Michael Baker International to complete a project study report for the project. And more recently, in November of 2021, the City Council provided approval for staff and MBI to proceed with Caltrans to begin the project initiation document phase for final approval of the project study report, which is the first phase to a multi-phase project. I would now like to turn the presentation over to Michael Baker International to provide project status update with Caltrans and presentation of the concept build alternatives for the Canaan Corridor. Joining us tonight, we have Mr. Eric Spangler and Mr. Jerusalem Verano.
Great, thanks a lot, Charmaine. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thanks for letting us present. Like Charmaine said, my name is Eric Spangler. I'm the consultant project manager for Michael Baker International. And so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we wanted to present a status of the project. We have refined the build alternatives from the presentation that we made to the City Council in November of 2021. We have submitted the GADs, which stands for Geometric Approval Drawings, to Caltrans in October and December of 2022, so just a couple months ago. We're happy to report that Caltrans has very minimal comments on the geometric alternatives. We've developed 3 good build alternatives that improve safety and operations along the corridor. The existing roadway is designed pretty efficiently, so it took us some time to come up with different build alternatives that improve the corridor. So we're very happy that Caltrans has received favorably the build alternative geometric approval drawings, the GADs. What we're doing right now is we're preparing technical studies and the project initiation document, which is referred to as a PSR PDS. It's a Caltrans terminology of a project initiation document. The PSR PDS stands for Project Study Report / Project Development Support. It's a project initiation and scoping document for the project, which I'll explain in the next slide. We are currently also, Charmaine and city staff have started preparing the cooperative agreement with Caltrans for the next phase of the project, which is project approval and environmental document, where we refine the build alternatives and the city would select one as preferred. Then the next phase would be PS&E plan specifications and estimates. The target completion date for this first initiation phase is in 6 months from now, August of 2023. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I wanted to explain a little bit more about a large infrastructure Caltrans project and where we're at in the process. There are 4 phases of a project. We are in the tail end of the project initiation document phase. And the document itself is that PSR PDS that I mentioned. So the purpose of the PID phase is to, number 1, define the purpose and need of the project. Number 2, develop multiple build alternatives that meet the purpose and need. Number 3, assess the feasibility, cost, and benefits of the concepts developed, which Jerusalem will present to you momentarily. And then number 4 is proceed to the next phase. And so it's basically a programming document. It's a document that scopes the estimated construction cost and the estimated time duration and the estimated level of environmental document and public outreach that would be required in the next phase. So we are in the first of 4 phases. The PID document is where we generate this. The majority of the technical analysis of the build alternatives is actually performed in the next phase, where we, in a more detailed fashion, compare each build alternative against each other. And that's the phase where we do robust public outreach. And that's also the phase that the city would use the information that we present to select a preferred alternative. That preferred alternative then moves to the next phase, which is in the pink color, which is preparing final construction plans. So plans, specifications, and cost estimates that then would be furnished to a contractor in the construction phase, which is the last phase. So you can see that there's 4 phases of a project, and the construction phase is we're estimating at about 20 to 24 months of construction duration, but each phase has its own, approximate 2-year timeline. Next phase, or next slide. The project study area is outlined on this slide. In brown is our traffic analysis study area. The blue is the physical improvements. So the GADs, the geometric approval drawings, which is the project geometrics, cover the area in blue that Jerusalem will present tonight. Next slide. Okay, so this is just the interchange Caltrans portion of the project, but I just wanted to give just a highlight of the existing traffic challenges and constraints along this portion of the project. So there's, within the Caltrans jurisdiction or adjacent to the Caltrans jurisdiction, you have 4 closely spaced intersections with high traffic volumes going through the Canaan corridor. Agoura Road, the southbound ramps / roadside, the northbound ramps / Canwood frontage road, and then also the Canwood East Canaan intersection is also a signalized intersection. Between Agoura and roadside, we have multiple driveways. At both the roadside and Canwood frontage roads, we have a signal operation that assigns an exclusive phase for the frontage roads, so we lose green time as we assign an exclusive phase for those frontage roads, which have a much smaller volumes than the other approaches to those intersections. So there's clear inefficiencies in that regard at those 2 signalized intersections. And in red, you can see the northbound 101 ramps have heavy AM and PM, demand and traffic volumes, and then the ramps coming from the south, actually on Canaan, to the freeway using the loop northbound on-ramp and the direct slip southbound on-ramp are heavy in the PM hours. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Jerusalem Verano, who's the project engineer, to kind of walk you through the concept alternatives that we've developed so far.
Good evening. As Eric mentioned, my name is Jerusalem Verano, and I am the project engineer. And so we'll jump right into the concepts that we've been developing with the city. We'll start with the no-build alternative, which is alternative 1. The no-build alternative is essentially where we leave the existing facility as is and make no improvements. So I'd like to just go over some of the existing features of the roadway along Canaan, and just to orient everyone, to the left in blue, we have the planned city improvements at Agoura and Canaan Road. Down the middle of the page is Canaan Road, and down the center is the southbound 101 freeway with all of the on and off ramps. To the right of the page will always be north throughout this presentation. So whenever I say top, I mean west, and whenever I say south, I mean east along Canaan. So there's a few deficiencies along the roadway, or I should say inefficiencies, that we'll get into on the next slide. So as Eric showed, there are frontage roads adjacent to the existing on and off ramps, and you can just see here that it becomes a confluence point at the southbound and northbound ramps where you have all these different connections coming together and creating this creating some of the congestion that you experience along Canaan Road. So that's one of the challenges that we faced along the route. Next slide, please. And then between Agoura Road and Roadside Drive, the whole area is fully developed. There's many different driveways, access points, and one of the challenges along the route is all of those access points, driveways being able to do right in, right out, make left turns from the center median and coming out of the driveway. So all of those access points create congestion. So that's another existing inefficiency along the route. Next slide, please. And all of that creates heavy congestion throughout the corridor. And then, of course, multimodal connectivity. This is a good image to show the existing cross-section looking north along Canaan Road. You can see here there are no bike facilities. So one of the key purpose and need elements of this project is to add bike lanes, continuous bike lanes to the project, and that would be part of the safety component of this work. Next slide, please. So that's alternative one, which is a no-build alternative, and now we'll jump into the build alternatives, which is the more exciting piece of the project. These are snippets from the geometric approval drawings that we've created for Caltrans. And so we'll really just get into the overview of the improvements. And I'd actually like to maybe skip to the alternative 2 overview page and save these sheets. If we can go to slide 19, please, for later to just come back and reference to. So if you keep going through, the alternatives have common features through each build alternative, which we'll highlight through the alternatives discussion. All right, perfect. Okay, so alternative 2. So this is an overview of the first build alternative. I'll just hit these bullet points real quickly, and then we'll get into some of the more detailed improvements. Alternative 2 will maintain the existing interchange configuration. This means we're not going to move any of the on and off ramps. They're going to stay where they are. We will improve them by widening, but they will stay as is. This alternative will add one additional lane along northbound and southbound Canaan Road from Agoura Road all the way through Thousand Oaks Boulevard, which is the limit of the physical improvements. And then a continuous Class 2 bike lane will be added in both the northbound and southbound directions. So that's a high-level overview. If we can go to the next slide, please. We'll get into some of the more detailed improvements. So again, here in blue, we have the city planned improvements at Agoura and Canaan. This is the terminus for all build alternatives. And just to note here on the screen, some of the colors that we're looking at in purple, the purple bubbles represent common build alternative features. So these are common to all of the build alternatives 2, 3, and 4. Anything in green represents a comment that we've addressed, a comment that was provided by City Council at the last meeting, such as adding bike facilities to the route throughout Canaan Road, excuse me. And then the black bubbles just represent the improvements proposed. So just moving left to right on the page, I'll just discuss in the northbound direction, we're adding one additional through lane, and that'll go from Agoura Road all the way up to the southbound ramp intersection, and even pass through up to the slip-on ramp. Class 2 bike facilities will be added in both directions. In the southbound direction, the right turn lane will be extended from Agoura Road all the way to the southbound off-ramp. And the existing dual left turn lanes will be converted into a single left turn lane without a median. So in the existing configuration, there is a median and it is dual lefts, but to provide the Class 2 bike lane and that additional through lane, we reconfigured this section of roadway to a single left turn lane. And just to note, in orange here, we have proposed right-of-way acquisitions. So along this stretch of roadway, and for all of the alternatives, we actually won't be widening into the southbound side of Canaan Road, but the northbound side where you can see there in orange, and that affects 2 driveways, and that's common to all 3 build alternatives. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of the interchange section, and we'll start again from the left side there at the southbound 101 off-ramps. We're adding one additional left turn lane and widening into the existing southbound loop on-ramp, protecting the existing gas station and Denny's, I believe, along that left side of the off-ramp to widen, to protect that side and stay within the right-of-way there. And that includes one additional lane on the southbound loop on-ramp. Moving along that southbound direction, we're adding a second right turn lane over Canaan Road. and widening the bridge as a result of that. And that's actually the case on both sides of the bridge. We're extending those right turn lanes, the approaches to the loop on-ramps, and that requires widening of the existing Canaan Road overcrossing, which you can see in blue. And then just overall, the ramps, the southbound 101 on-ramp and the northbound loop on-ramp will be widened by one additional lane. Roadside Drive and West Canwood Street will remain as is, as well as the northbound 101 loop on-ramp with this alternative. And again, adding that Class 2 bike lane north and south and one additional lane north and south. Next slide. Okay, moving north of West Canwood Street, we get into some of the improvements up to East Canwood. We're adding one additional through lane in the northbound direction, and in addition to that, a right turn lane at East Canwood Street. One thing to note here, we do have landscape medians. In green, we've noted that this was a city council comment that we've since adjusted on the plans to not impact the existing trees, to try and salvage them as much as possible. So this design maintains the existing landscaping, at least the trees, and reduces the median or reconfigures them by narrowing. And of course, adding the Class 2 bike lanes in each direction. And then in the southbound direction, to accommodate these improvements, meaning the widening of the Canaan Road for the Class 2 bike lanes and additional north-south lanes, we've had to reconstruct the existing sidewalk. So in the southbound direction, you can see there in purple and orange, the sidewalk is being widened and reconstructed, and that results in a need for a new retaining wall. Also along this stretch, from West Canwood Street to Thousand Oaks in the southbound direction, the existing power poles, overhead power poles, will be undergrounded into the existing sidewalk. And then at the West Canwood Street intersection, the right turn lane will be revised to accommodate these improvements. So that summarizes this sheet. If we can go to the next sheet. Thank you. So here we have the section of roadway from Hillrise Drive up to Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Again, we're undergrounding the existing overhead utility lines along the southbound direction and reconstructing that sidewalk area to provide an ADA path of travel. One lane in each direction will be added here, as well as that continuous Class 2 bike facility. This results in a need for right-of-way acquisitions along that stretch of roadway in the southbound Canaan Road direction. It's a narrow sliver right-of-way take, and that's a result, again, of the Class 2 bike addition and additional lanes, as well as the undergrounding of the power pole lines. And just one more thing to note on that slide, we're not widening into the northbound direction due to the residential community there. There's also a sound wall, and along the southbound direction, the frontage road is a bit wider, so there was more of an opportunity for widening. Next slide, please. This is the intersection of Canaan Road and Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Here we're again showing that narrow right-of-way take on the top left corner of the page. We're adding a right turn, addition of a right turn lane in the eastbound Thousand Oaks direction, as well as reconfiguring that section of road to accommodate a Class 2 bike lane. That extends through Thousand Oaks Boulevard to that westbound side, where we'll be adding a left turn lane in the westbound direction onto southbound Canaan Road. In that same direction, we're adding a right turn lane from westbound Thousand Oaks onto northbound Canaan Road. That improvement does require right-of-way from the private property parcel there on the bottom right corner of the page, as well as improvements to the existing hillside there. And of course, along Canaan Road, we are proposing bike facilities in order to tie into the existing bike facilities north of Thousand Oaks Boulevard on Canaan. So that summarizes alternative 2. Now we can jump into alternative 3.
By bike facilities, do you just mean the bike lane, or what exactly do you mean by that?
Class 2 bike facility, which is a 5-foot bikeway along the outside edges of the roadway in the shoulder area.
We'll have a chance for public comments after he speaks. Thank you.
Okay, here is an overview of Alternative 3. Alternative 3 will reconfigure the existing roadside drive slip on-ramp. It'll shift the ramp onto roadside drive and convert roadside drive into a one-way road up to Cornell. This alternative will also add one lane to northbound Canaan Road from West Cannonwood Street up to Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and one lane from southbound Canaan Road on southbound Canaan Road from Thousand Oaks Boulevard to Hillrise Drive, as well as, again, a Class 2 bike facility, which, to clarify, is a 5-foot bikeway along the shoulder of the roadway. Next slide, please. Again, the purple boxes represent common build alternative features, so I won't mention those again. I'll just try to focus in on some of the other improvements specific to this section of roadway. There are similarities. Again, we're converting that dual left turn lane into a single left turn lane, but this time we're including a median to control access along the route. So the driveways here would be right in and right out with this alternative. We are extending the right turn lane in the southbound direction up to Agoura, up to the southbound ramp intersection, and again adding a new through lane in the northbound direction that goes all the way up to the ramp intersection. And a right turn only lane to access the southbound on-ramp is provided there on the bottom right corner. This will be the new lane that takes you to the southbound slip on-ramp that has been relocated onto Roadside Drive, which you'll see in the next slide. And again, Class 2 bike facilities, north and south, and right-of-way acquisitions along the northbound segment of Canaan. Next slide, please. So there's a lot going on this slide, so we'll try to take it one piece at a time. We'll start with the bottom left corner there, where the existing slip on-ramp, the southbound slip on-ramp, which is that direct line that comes from Canaan onto the US 101 freeway, has been relocated to Roadside Drive. The right turn only lane is the access now from Canaan onto that segment of roadway, and Roadside Drive is one way from Canaan all the way to Cornell. This requires reconfiguring the existing park and ride lot, as you can see here on the screen, relocates the entrance and this has the advantage of removing the westbound phase for the roadside signal, which will improve the existing intersection operations. This will also help eliminate some conflicts between pedestrians and bikes. So overall, it does make this crossing a bit safer by separating those movements and that slip ramp. In purple, we have, again, the other improvements that we noted previously, so I won't touch on that. We have the widening of Canaan Road to accommodate the proposed improvements, the through lanes going north, as well as that additional right turn lane in the southbound direction. We have continuous bike lanes in both the north and south directions, and that does summarize this sheet. So we can move to the next slide, please. All right, moving through Canaan Road on the northbound direction, we're adding one additional through lane, an additional right turn lane along East Canwood Street, again reconfiguring the medians, narrowing them, and adding the Class 2 bike lanes, as well as reconstructing that southbound direction of Canaan Road for a new sidewalk and all of the other improvements that we're considering, including the overhead power lines. One unique feature to this alternative is adding a second right turn lane to the West Canwood Street, Canaan Road's southbound direction. So you can see there, we've added a dedicated right turn lane onto West Canwood Street, as well as a dedicated through right, which goes to the northbound slip on-ramp. Next slide, please. All right, improvements here between Hillrise and Thousand Oaks Boulevard. We're adding an additional through lane in the northbound direction up to Thousand Oaks Boulevard, continuous bike lanes, reconfiguring the medians, and again, very similar improvements to Alternative 2 here. Next slide. Again, very similar improvements to alternative 2 on this slide. One difference is we've taken out that right turn pocket that was impacting right-of-way for the bottom right corner private property parcel. So now instead of a dedicated right turn lane, we have a through right lane there, and that does affect the intersection operations, but eliminates a right-of-way impact. Otherwise, the improvements here are very similar to alternatives 2 and 4. Next slide. So the alternative 4 improvements include maintaining the existing interchange configuration. One unique element is eliminating the left turn movements from Roadside Drive and Canwood onto Canaan Road at the southbound and northbound ramp intersections. Again, the Class 2 bike lane is provided, but this time from Agoura Road up to Hill Rise Drive. That's the 5-foot bike lane. And a difference with this alternative is we're adding a Class 4 bike lane from Hill Rise Drive to Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and that's about a 10-foot wide bike lane. It has a 3-foot buffer and a 7-foot bike lane, so it's buffer separated, and that's being done from Hill Rise up to Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Next slide, please. So here we have kind of a hybrid of alternatives 2 and 3. We're again widening into that northbound direction where the orange hatching is shown, requiring reconstruction of those driveways and additional right-of-way take. We're adding an additional through lane and those continuous bike lanes. We have converted the dual left turn lanes into a single lane, but this alternative does include a median with, you can see in the middle of the page, a bit of a jog for the through lane to shift the lanes up towards the southbound direction to better channelize traffic and provide capacity through this section of roadway. Next slide, please. So just touching on some of the unique elements of this alternative, on the bottom left corner where it reads, eliminates left turn from Roadside Drive to Canaan Road to maximize signal timing. So that's one of the unique locations where we've eliminated the left turn movement from Roadside Drive onto southbound Canaan Road, and that'll help maximize signal timing for Canaan. Similarly, on the top right corner, we've eliminated the left turn lane from West Canwood Street to the northbound Canaan Road, again to maximize signal timing for Canaan Road, the through movements. And that does change the overall configuration of the intersections, the southbound and northbound ramp intersections. And overall improvements are similar through this segment, slightly different with adding the additional lanes throughout and the bridge widening. Next slide. Similar improvements here to alternatives 2 and 3, adding that through lane up to East Canwood Street, right turn dedicated right turn lane at East Canwood Street, construction of a retaining wall, undergrounding power poles, and the right turn lane reconfiguration at West Canwood Street, as well as what I mentioned earlier about the left turn lane elimination at West Canwood. After this segment, just north of here, East Canwood Street, that's where things get a little different with this alternative. If we could go to the next slide. So rather than widening Canaan Road through this segment with an additional lane, we've maintained 2 lanes of traffic, north and south along Canaan between Hill Rise and Thousand Oaks. And we've utilized that space for a buffered bike lane. So that, again, that's a 3-foot buffer separation with a 7-foot bike lane in both the north and southbound direction. This does require reconstructing the existing sidewalk along the southbound direction, as well as includes that feature of undergrounding the existing power poles and requiring a sliver right-of-way take in that northwest corner of Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Next slide. And here at the intersection of Thousand Oaks Boulevard and Canaan, we have very similar improvements to alternative 3. Pretty much a similar configuration along Thousand Oaks, but again, we're transitioning that buffer separated bikeway along Canaan Road in the northbound direction and starting in the southbound direction. So that's the one unique change here. Otherwise, the improvements are very similar to alternatives 2 and 3. So that concludes the overview of the concepts, and I'll just pass it over to Charmaine.
Thank you, Jerusalem. So what are the next steps for the project? There is no immediate action required tonight. However, this item was really just for an update to City Council on the status of the project with Caltrans, and we do welcome any feedback or questions tonight. The project is proceeding steadily through Caltrans to finish the PID phase by the end of summer, beginning of fall. The completion of the PID phase will result in a final approval of the project study report, project development support document, and it programs the project with Caltrans that identifies the cost and schedule of viable build alternatives that meet the purpose and need of this project. The city has requested already to execute a co-op agreement with Caltrans for the next phase, the project approval, which is called the Project Approval Environmental Document, or in other words, the PAED phase. We anticipate the co-op would be brought to City Council this summer for approval. Once in the PAED phase, robust comparisons of alternatives will be performed. More technical analysis is performed on each alternative, as well as presentation of these build alternatives to the public and stakeholders for their input. It is during this next phase that we can continue to refine the concept alternatives presented today and ultimately to select the preferred build alternative that we would construct for Canaan Corridor. Next slide. And with that, this concludes our presentation. Staff respectively invites the City Council to provide feedback and to answer any questions.
In depth. Before we move on to public comment, does any council member have any questions of staff presentation? I can start down this end. Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everybody who's been working on this, because when I first got this to review, my eyes glazed over. So thank you to the Public Works Committee, past, present, future, and also our wonderful staff. And especially thank you to Ms. Forte and Ms. Yambao for sitting down with me for quite a long time to get a lot of my questions answered. And after hearing this, I have just a few more. I won't go through all of the questions I had for poor Charmaine, but I do have a few more. So each phase on there was, on average about 24 months. So what you're saying is the best case scenario, this project would be completed in a 6-year period?
6 to 7, yeah.
6 to 7. And that's for the whole corridor, not just the Caltrans piece, is that correct?
That would be for the whole corridor if we did it as one large project.
Okay, and that's best case.
Best case.
So if we didn't do it as one large project, it would likely take longer instead.
Best case scenario, if we did it as one, we're looking at 6 to 7 years if it goes smoothly.
Okay.
And if we have funding, et cetera. If we were to split the project up, Caltrans would still do its Caltrans process, which is the 6 to 7 years. The area outside of the Caltrans, that could be done separately, but it's still a process because it would become a project that you would have to go through design, environmental document, public input, et cetera. Not sure what my guess would be on that if we split it, but maybe we'd shave off a couple years. I don't know, but it still would have to coordinate with what Caltrans approves.
Okay. So then that leads to my next question, which is, it sounds like public workshops and public comment come in the next stage, the next phase. So again, do you expect that we're doing that as the corridor as a whole, or do you think we're going to have to go kind of back and forth with the public depending on how this plays out? I'm just curious as to what I don't want to do is go down the road with one piece of it, get public input for that, and then we move on to another piece and there's a backlash that affects what we've already done or approved, or how do we manage the whole public workshop, public input process?
I anticipate it'll be like, if we do it as one project, one whole, like, public workshop for the whole thing, I'm going to ask Eric, because he's done a lot of them different with Caltrans, and he probably has really great experience on how that's handled with the public.
Yeah, phasing a project, kind of like it needs to probably stay together as one project for CEQA and compliance purposes. It's hard to like legally separate phases of the project and do smaller environmental documents for each of the phase. You basically have to consider the whole thing. And then the other reason why likely you'd want to keep it as one project is for funding. So Metro Measure M is probably the likely source of construction dollars. Metro won't allow the city to process a portion of the project, and or maybe they would if it's just like localized intersection improvements, say at Thousand Oaks Boulevard, Canaan Road. There's a chance that you could request from Metro funding for a small portion of the project and not the rest of the corridor. That would have to be a separate conversation with Metro. But yeah, generally when you're presenting the project to the public, it's all one process. Everything is interrelated. But really the main reasons why the local agencies have to keep the projects as one project is for CEQA compliance, the California Environmental Quality Act, and then also funding.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then it was my understanding from our chat that it's not just these 3 or 4 set alternatives. These are just a sample of what it could look like. So if I like something from alternative 3, but I also like something from alternative 2 that isn't in alternative 3, do you want that? You don't necessarily want that feedback today, but how do we get that to you? Like if I love this piece, but I don't see it, because I know everything I want can't happen, right? Like I want really wide bike lanes and nice, and I want all the medians and I want it all, but I understand that can't happen. So when do you want those specifics from us?
So Debbie, we can definitely have feedback today. I mean, the more feedback we get in every phase is great.
Okay.
We take account into that. We compile them all. We move forward at every step. But like we had said earlier, and I believe it was mentioned through the presentation, that these alternatives kind of provide us a menu of options. All of them would have to be analyzed comparatively and then separately and to see how they work to meet that end goal.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can also chime in, Charmaine. And so, yeah, our intent was to generate multiple build alternatives that differ from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Some features are better than others. We just know that already.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is that the preferred alternative could be a hybrid of 2 or maybe a hybrid of all 3.
Got it.
We would merge those features into one build alternative at the beginning of the next phase. When we start traffic analysis, we hope to do a traffic microsimulation where we would show you a video of the alternative 1 no build, like here's what it would look like in 20 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
or 20 years from the opening year, which would be 2048. If you did nothing, here's alternative 2, here's alternative 3, here's alternative 4, and here's the hybrid of the features that you liked. And then we could further refine the geometrics down to exactly what, the city likes.
Okay, thank you. I have one last question, and again, please tell me if today's not the day to ask this question. That it came up when I was looking at the different builds on almost all of the alternatives, with the exception of the no build. There's a bike lane when you're crossing the freeway on Canaan that really has to go kind of towards the middle of the road so that they're not in the path of cars turning right onto the freeway on-ramps. So to me, that's, how is that safe? Where you've got a bike coming down, the right-hand side of a road, but on that overpass, it somehow needs to get into the middle while you've got cars in the middle going to the right to try to get onto the freeway. Like, that seemed to be a common thread of all of those, and I'm just concerned as to, are these things how deep are these things being analyzed right now?
Yeah, so that's the Caltrans standard, so Caltrans has jurisdiction on their right-of-way, and what they like to see is 2 possible accommodation paths for bicyclists, depending on how hardcore or experienced they are. So we know that there's going to be the more hardcore street bikers that will take a lane, right? And that's just their skill at biking. And then you have the sidewalk as well for the family or the kids to be on the sidewalk. So they can just stay on the sidewalk, stop at the intersection, push the push button, get across that way.
Okay.
So there's 2 possible routes. So Caltrans requires that the bike refuge lane, they call it, is between the right turn pocket, the exclusive right turn pocket, and the through lane. So a couple years ago, I helped the city of Thousand Oaks with a Wendy Drive interchange. So that is a very complicated from a bike perspective if you ever drive that interchange. And because there's a 2-lane slip-on ramp that is not a right turn, it's a kind of a high-speed slip-on ramp. And so, I think we have, so anyway, that's the answer to the question.
Okay, that helps. Thank you so much. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Great. Thank you. So one of the questions was regarding the pick and choose of taking some components, so that was answered. Another question is, are the common design elements, can we assume that will be included in any alternative? Is that a safe assumption to make?
Again, those are things that we can discuss and we could remove depending on what the council wants. Everything, elements that get removed have to be analyzed and how that meets our purpose and need for the project and the goals that the council sets for Canaan Corridor.
So would tonight be the appropriate time to say, I like everything in the common design elements? Is that the type of feedback that we're looking for?
Absolutely, Councilmember Wolf. Anything that you have feedback on, I'd like to hear.
Well, I like everything in the common design elements.
We'll make note of that.
Make that be noted. The other part is, so this would be funded through Measure M. Can we talk a little bit about what the funding mechanism would be and how reliable that is?
May I? Can everybody hear me, or am I still cutting in and out?
We can hear.
We can hear you.
You can, okay. Jeremy, I'm sorry, Councilmember Wolf, we've identified Measure M as a likely funding source. It comes in every year, it's allocated through the COG for us without a daylight at this point. And so it's a safe place to say we would park money until we could fund this. Now, staff would actively be going after other grant funding to bridge that, to make this something that we could construct sooner, and to save that Measure M funding for other projects. But at the same time, Caltrans wants to know, as you enter into CEQA documents and as you go through the project, that this is, that the council has the intent of funding it, and knowing that we have that safe revenue source coming in, it's a good thing to point to as we go through the project.
Okay, that perfectly answers that question, so thank you. The next question, and are there any, in any of the alternatives, are there any takings that we would need to be concerned of, or eminent domain type situation that wasn't identified here?
In the presentation on all 3 alternatives, there are areas that were shown that would have been, that are identified as takes, right-of-way takes. They're minor, but we can go through each of them, but there are. And it's not really necessarily eminent domain until you can't, basically that process starts when you cannot go any further with the property owner. It's usually a negotiation that happens, friendly negotiation. But at some point, if we can't come to some agreement, then it goes into what you call the eminent domain.
And Charmaine, if I can add just a comment, is so one of the goals of our design is to, as we need to widen and we need to acquire little slivers of right-of-way, not to widen to a dimension that would trigger a full parcel acquisition. So the right-of-way that you see on the exhibits The orange shape is partial sliver acquisitions only, not full takes. So, yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. You know, they can get complicated. And then my last question is, and I think you said in the beginning, but the last Canaan project was completed in 2006. Was that the correct date when the bridge was last widened?
I believe it was 2007 and 8. Nate, I think you were instrumental in
I
that.
think it was 2006, actually. I was going to introduce that at the beginning of the meeting. I apologize. Yes, the Canaan intersection was completed in 2006, operational in 2006.
The bridge wasn't widened as part of that project. The on-ramps and off-ramps were adjusted, but the bridge itself was not.
Oh, okay, thank you for clarifying that. So do we know when the last time Canaan was widened? Or that we don't have, like, there's not like a date that we can...
Yeah, it's the existing bridge, and it might even be the original bridge. I don't believe that it was widened at any point.
Okay, wow. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sylvester?
Thank you. You've asked some excellent questions, so I don't need to ask them again. I just have one other thing to say is I wouldn't be able to judge any of these versions until I know the amount of cars that are going to be coming through in them. Because what our community is going to say is which version is going to let the most cars flow through at the fastest, in the fastest time. So going forward, if we could have some information on that statistic, that would really help me know which way is the correct way to go. And also, in the various sort of sections, say, in this, the southbound, if we do it this way, it'll give this many, or B will give us this many. Because I think really, in the end, that's all that our community cares about, is how quickly can they get through. And I think they'll accept maybe some what we would see as design flaws if it gets them through faster. So that would really help me going forward. Thanks.
Councilmember Sylvester, if I could respond to that. This phase of the project just identifies and studies and really presents a slew of things that we may do to Caltrans. In the next phase, we're going to have a really robust analysis of the traffic as it passes through each of these moments, and we will be bringing back the results of that analysis to the council and through the Public Works Subcommittee. So how traffic passes through each one of these alternatives is going to be studied in depth, and that'll be how we decide on what the ultimate project that is recommended to the council will be.
Is that any more questions, Councilmember? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Thank you. A question for you. If heading eastbound on Canwood, you hit the Canaan intersection, and if you take out that left turn lane, how are we routing those people to get to Vaughn's and Ralph's?
So the local traffic, at least from like Forest Cove, would go up Forest Cove up to Thousand Oaks Boulevard and to the Vaughn Shopping Center on Thousand Oaks and Canaan.
So there'd be an impact on the people who live on Forest Cove?
There would, yes, so the traffic would be redirected to the other Forest Cove, Reyes Adobe, yes, the other roadways.
Okay, so you'd go up Forest Cove or go up Reyes Adobe, and then you'd come back Thousand Oaks Boulevard?
Correct.
Okay. And then you'd get on Canaan to get onto the 101?
Correct.
Okay.
You can turn right, so when you're heading eastbound, you can make that right onto the northbound 101.
Okay, but not the southbound. But you could get on the southbound at Reyes Adobe.
At Reyes Adobe, correct.
Okay. You said something about the park and ride under Alternative 3 being reconfigured. What is that? We wouldn't lose it, right?
No, we wouldn't be losing it, but the reconfiguration would happen because the driveway entrance would have to get reconfigured because we're now making that roadside one direction. And I can't remember what else is there.
Yeah, I can explain it. So we're reconfiguring the slip on-ramp from Canaan to Roadside Drive, and that reconfiguration requires reconstructing that existing parking lot, which is the park and ride lot. So it's really, we're keeping it, it's just being adjusted to match the new geometrics of the roadways.
How would you get into that parking lot if we close down Roadside?
It would come through Roadside Drive. So Roadside Drive will still be accessible, but the driveway would be a right in and a right out.
A right in and a right out. Okay, thank you. A right in and a right out. Okay, I got.
A left in and a left out.
Yeah, left in.
Okay.
I'm all twisted up. Thank you.
Otherwise, yeah, okay. Second. Do you want my comments now or just questions?
I think just questions, and then we'll
Okay.
come back for comments.
Thank you.
Awesome. I think I'll go ahead and finish on the questions. On alternative 3, with the slip-on ramp that we were just talking about with Roadside Drive, it is just going to be one way then there? There would not be two, it wouldn't only be turning to the right, you couldn't come out of Roadside Drive?
It'll be one way, and it'll be one way to Cornell.
Okay.
Yes.
So if it's one way, then you're basically both alternative 3 and alternative 4, you're eliminating the left turn from Roadside on to Canaan, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the other question I had, is there any reason why we could not combine the Class 4 bike lane on Canaan between Hill Rise and T.O. Boulevard with alternative 3? Is there a reason why that's not included in alternative 3?
It could. It would have to be reviewed and analyzed. It's just that alternative provided the Class 4 as kind of a menu item. It's just to get some of our desires or desired features into one of the alternatives.
Yeah, if I could comment
Yes.
too. Yeah, we could. We could certainly do that. And then back to the one-way Canwood alternative 3 idea. So think about, there's a scientific way of when communities become built out, and to how to handle congestion, right? When two-way streets just don't operate anymore. Like, so think of Pasadena. Think about the 210 freeway. You can visualize, okay, well, Pasadena has decided to take their frontage roads that front the 210 and convert them to one way. So you can sort of visualize, you know, how that operates, and how you have the frontage road, and there's the ramps, the off ramps and on ramps that intersect that one-way frontage road. So that's basically what we're implementing here in alternative 3, just for one block of Canwood.
I think those were the majority. I guess on the timing between alternative 3 and alternative 4, and the fact that you're going to have a longer or not as long a light at Canaan and Roadside. Actually, I guess it would be about the same. Would the timing be the same between alternative 3 and alternative 4 with the light signal on Canaan?
Yeah, the traffic signals all have to be coordinated, so they have to have the same exact cycle length for each. It's just the green time is allocated more to the heavy move. So, so there's more green time for the off ramp and Canaan Road.
All right, and when you talked about the medians being narrowed in certain areas, can you give us a little bit more meaning about narrowed? Does that mean cut in half, like width-wise, or what do we mean by narrowed?
Yeah, it's basically our concept that we've come up with, was just eliminate the 2-foot mow strips on each side and keep all the existing planted area. So keep all the existing planted area and then move the curbs in by eliminating those mow strips.
Okay.
Yeah, on each side. So it's basically taking 2 feet away from each side for a total of 4 feet.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Mayor Anstead, do you mind if I ask
No,
a question?
go ahead.
And I apologize for not asking this earlier, but looking at alternative 4 with the no left turn on West Canwood, would emergency personnel be able to make a left with the fire station being right there? It concerns me, but my question is it legal for emergency personnel to make a left with non-designated left turn?
Yes, it would be. They would have the right with their, they have the sirens, and when that happens, everyone has to move over, and they can make those type of movements.
And for safety purposes, is that, have you seen that be an issue anywhere else, or something that's taken into consideration in other cities when they're looking at design?
Recently, we were working with City of Palos Verdes Estates on a double-lane roundabout right in front of their city hall, and so there was concern that we were changing the access right at the fire station and the PD right at City Hall onto PV Drive West, and it was becoming a right turn only move. But the PD concurred that with lights and sirens that they could make the left. So it's always like a give and take, and so yeah, the emergency vehicles would have to turn on lights and sirens to be able to turn left.
Okay, thank you.
That's all. Okay. All right, thank you very much for answering our questions. We'll go now to move into public comments. Written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please raise the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you. We've not received any public comments, written, or speaker cards submitted. I'll now defer to staff for any remote participants. Amber?
We lose her?
I'll assume we have no speakers.
Okay. And if we end up having one, I'll come back in and let them talk. Staff has requested that the city council provide feedback. Does any council member have any further questions or feedback? And I'll just go around the horn. And Mayor Pro Tem, you can start us off.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I heard a couple of things that I'm sitting here jumping out of my skin. Words like, we're going to try our best to salvage the trees. That's when we've had these conversations since day one, the prior councils were very serious about the landscaping. We don't want Canaan Road to become Ventura Boulevard. And with all due respect to everybody, that's what I've been hearing for 12 years, 11 years on the council from our residents, is that we don't want to be the San Fernando Valley. And this is becoming really massive. There's a lot I like about it, don't get me wrong, but when you start taking out landscaping and you start pulling out trees, now you're talking about massive road rage, 6 lanes across on Canaan Road. To me, I don't think, so I guess my point is we need to get this to the public as soon as possible and have a workshop on it because, the more people hear about this, the more they may want a no build. And we probably want to I don't think that'll happen, but I think that you're going to see that people don't want, especially north of the 101, they do not want that to turn into Ventura Boulevard. Or 6 lanes, 7 lanes, 8 lanes. It could be 8 lanes across. So even though we want the bike lanes, maybe we need to start considering and talking to the residents about routing our bike traffic, our inexperienced bike traffic. I don't think anybody will be riding down Canaan, families on the sidewalk there, to be honest. So I think you have experienced cyclists that ride Canaan. They're going to ride that regardless if there's a Class 4 bike lane or not. And so, perhaps we want to be considering rerouting our cyclists to take Reyes Adobe or Chesbro to cross over before we start building this massive boulevard. You'd have to go from Canaan Road to Canaan Boulevard. And so, the one part that I think is really a bottleneck is when you're south of the 101 between Agoura Road and Roadside. And I think that I personally like the idea of taking the signal out there. We just did it for, while we were widening Roadside, I didn't get many complaints, if any, about it being one way temporarily. So I have a feeling that, people could become accustomed to that. In terms of the Canwood being blocked off from getting onto Canaan, I'd like to hear what the residents have to say about that live over there. It may not be a problem, but, if you live on Forest Cove, the traffic's already heavy enough there that they have speed bumps. So I don't know how much they're going to like, the community, which is, I don't want to call it high density, but, the mixed multifamily units that are on Canwood now would all be going up Forest Cove. So I just think that if we can, jump the gun here and get some public workshops going, I think we'll probably have a better idea of what's going on. And then, in terms of the stage where we talk about landscaping and lighting and aesthetics, I just don't want to get too far down this road and all of a sudden these alternatives are kind of cement and stone and we've spent a lot of money on them. I do agree with the other council members that we want to pick and choose things. And so let us, I can say today, in my opinion, closing off roadway or having roadway be one way would be a good, I think that'll really help. But when you start going north of the 101, I'm concerned. Thank you.
Councilmember Sylvester.
Well, as I learned at my training academy, I'm to be brief, and if my fellow council member says what I feel, then I shall just say, I second what Council Member Buckley-Weber said. So I will wait for future deliberations. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Councilmember Lopez.
I guess I missed that training because I have a lot to say. I'm going to say it. Thank you. So I do have some comments I want to share. The biggest backups we have, really from both directions, north or south, are for people needing to get on the freeway. So, what I liked on all these different alternatives were the options that you presented to prioritize getting people on the on-ramps. Yes, there's backup getting off the freeway, not nearly as bad as getting on the freeway. And that's both from, Morrison and Fountainwood and people coming from the north, as well as Cornell and people coming from the south. They're just trying to get on the freeway. So I like the options that really prioritized streamlining that to just get them out of that really short stretch, really between Agoura Road and Canwood. It's so many lights, so many intersections on this tiny stretch. And so, I'm very intrigued by the one-way roadside, the on-ramp that now would be past the park and ride. Very intrigued by that. I, like Councilmember Buckley-Weber, don't think the world would come to an end if we kept that one way. We did have it one way. I know the businesses weren't 100% thrilled, but I think everybody learned to adjust. And then they just came back out the other side on Agoura Road and got back to the freeway that way or went down to Chesbro. So I really want to prioritize the freeway on-ramps more than an extra turn lane, assuming we have to pick and choose, which we do, an extra turn lane onto Canwood coming from the north is not, to me, the priority. We have a turn lane. It doesn't back up. That's not where people are going as much as on the on-ramps. I love the idea of being able to put the power poles underground. I mean, again, we don't have a lot of space. If that's something we can use grant money for, or work with Edison to try to get those underground, great, more space for us. So I would definitely like to prioritize that. Like Councilmember Buckley Weber, I do want to prioritize median landscapes. I think that's a huge quality of life when you get off that freeway and you're driving home and you see those trees and you're just like, you internalize that calm that you're almost home, and our trees and our nature really says that. I think it is a key tenet of Agoura Hills that we are, an oak leaf is our motto, our image there, logo. So, I really think that people internalize that. So I would definitely want to prioritize that. And again, in the quest to prioritize the freeway on-ramps, I would absolutely consider looking a little deeper into limiting those left turns. So again, it's not an issue if we make roadside one way, but from the Canwood onto Canaan Road going north, I mean, the only time I do that is when I'm just kind of running errands, and I think the people that live in that Forest Cove neighborhood are probably already going to T.O. Boulevard to get to the shopping centers, because it's easier to get there from T.O. Boulevard than it is to go through that Canaan T.O. interchange. So I don't see a huge impact, but I would definitely want to do more, to Councilmember Sylvester's point, more traffic modeling to see what that is. One of the things that I disagree a little bit with Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber. I think we do want to prioritize bike lanes across that bridge. We have people who live in the apartments. Agoura Village is coming, and we want to make sure that people can get from the north side of our town to the future Agoura Village. So I know it's a little rough, but I do want to see bike lanes across that bridge, obviously in a safe way. If there's some other way to get them across, but if you live in the apartments or if you live in Morrison, you're not going to go all the way to Reyes Adobe to come back to Agoura Village. So, our bike master plan is really, to be able to get people to that future town center that we're hoping to have. So, again, I'd like to see some analyses of how we can safely get people across that bridge. And then my last comment about that is that I follow all these cities and groups on social media, and they say that these cities are planned for cars and they really need to be planned for people and for bikes. And I really want to take that to heart. So I do want to make sure that people aren't sitting in their cars and stuck on Canaan and trying to get on the freeway. But I also, to Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber's point, I don't want to be a slave to the car. And maybe the 2 lanes and the bike lane is a little bit longer in the car, but it's more accessible for people to get out of the car. So our short-term focus is to really help people with their quality of life and not be stuck in traffic. But I don't want to take it so far that we're slave to the cars. And with that, I just want to end with, I know this tonight is about Caltrans and an update. It hurts that it's going to take so long to see any of this, and we may not any of us be sitting on this council. And so I would just ask staff, is there anything we can do, short-term, easy fix, low-hanging fruit, any of this we can do faster, that we can ease that pain of our constituents that are trying to get in and out of work and traveling every day. I don't know what that is, but if there's anything that we can do short-term faster that doesn't require, a 6-year, 2-year EIR, all of that kind of stuff, I would love to hear it. And finally, just my congrats to the team, because to have minimal comments from Caltrans, I think, is a big nod to you all. So thank you for all the work. Thanks.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a few comments regarding this project. I mean, Canaan is so many things to so many people. 40,000 daily trips is wild. The fact that it services 2 school districts, Oak Park and Agoura, and the beach access and the access to the Santa Monica Mountains, it makes it so incredibly dynamic and so used. So my concern is that I don't know if it can be all the things we want it to be here. And I unfortunately agree with Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber. While I want it to be a bike lane, I'm a seasoned bike rider, it's treacherous to cross Canaan. I don't know any way in which that wouldn't be the case. Now, that we want that because it meets our climate action goals, it meets our mobility goals. I just don't see that happening. And then I also think it's really important to get the public input because Canaan is so charged and so important for so many people. As I mentioned, I like the common design elements. One one component that I really appreciate is the additional turn lane on Thousand Oaks Boulevard to Canaan, I believe going east towards the freeway. I could see that being low-hanging fruit. So that's just, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I think that would be something that could be safe to consider. I think the landscaping is important, especially keeping our native landscape in place is something I would really support. And as Councilmember Sylvester says, I agree with the points my other council members made. So thank you.
May I just?
Yes.
Because having said I'm going to be brief, I just had an idea, and it's probably a really stupid one, so I'm going to say it. Have you ever considered having a bike pedestrian-only bridge above?
Just for a little history, we looked at putting an overhead bridge over Canaan Road to connect the 2 parcels at the corners of Agoura Road and Canaan Road. Nate's looking at me and saying, don't bring that up again.
No, not that way. Not
I
that
thought
way.
it was a brilliant idea, but nobody else did.
No, I was thinking of actually over the freeway.
Uh-huh.
So your bicycle could come along Canaan, and then before it gets to that whole mess,
go
up and over.
The problem, if you recall, was that the ADA requirements were so strict that you would have to have elevators and this and that, and it became this monstrosity, and that's when it kind of fell apart. That was the history of it. It wasn't that the idea itself was crazy, it's that in order to comply with everything we'd have to comply with, it was going to be this massive.
Okay, does it have to have an elevator or a ramp?
Well, you'd have to make it ADA among other things in terms of safety.
But if it's a ramp, we've got the whole of Canaan Road to create ramps.
Well,
anyway, I'm just throwing it out there as an out-of-the-box idea.
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. I'll throw out my comments. I think one thing actually about going back to Councilmember Sylvester's comment about the bike lane and about everybody being concerned about it going across the highway. I think they did a pretty good job on Lindero Boulevard where when they increased the lanes there, they put a green stripe and it's through I guess what you would call the middle, and for the bike lane, and it's marked pretty well to where the cars see it and the bicyclists see it, so they stay right in that corridor when they're crossing, and it's not too difficult for somebody that's been cycling for a while. Now, for kids and others, I think it is still tough to do that. So, but I think that's at least a good alternative, and I think that's what the state has tried to do, from what I could tell. But anyway, so that's one alternative. But my comments are, I think it's a good first step, but I think everybody's kind of giving you feedback that there's a lot of pieces of it that we like. I think the one piece that I am, obviously one area that I'm big on is talking about the bike lanes. But number 2, and actually it's a close number 2, is the beach traffic. I mean, and that's what the roadside right pocket turn is supposed to take care of, to be able to get people on the highway without them having to sit at the light and wait to go forward, to be able to then turn to go to go north, I guess it is, on the 101. And so I think that alternative, or having that easy on and off there, I think is important to address the beach traffic, because it does back up. I mean, every summer we're sitting there with people backed up and they're not happy. And so I definitely want to try to take care of that with this improvement. I also want to try to see trees saved and not have to cut into as much of the easements that we don't have to. So I mean, I'm willing to take a look at all that. But I think those are the top two priorities. And I don't perceive that the traffic, and you guys would have to tell me as the traffic engineers whether the traffic is backing up at the 101. The majority of the time I see when I'm on Canaan, the backup is closer to T.O. Boulevard and not necessarily at the 101 interchange, where it's backing. Like, I don't see it backing all the way up to T.O. Boulevard. It backs up a little bit, like the Canwood. It would back up to Canwood, but I haven't seen it back up all the way to T.O. Boulevard. So that's not as big a concern for me personally, on the extra lanes, than it is over on the other side where it's backing up from the beach side. So I think those are my comments for now, and I'll look forward. I have not been on the Public Works Committee before, but I am now, so I look forward to working with you on the Public Works and Mayor Pro Tem going forward. So now I'm going to actually reopen the public comments, because I think that we have a public comment. So Kimberly, I ask you to let us know if there's some public comment.
Yes. Helena? Helena Horak, if you come up to the microphone, you'll have 3 minutes.
I used to live in Forest Cove, so I have,
Come on.
I used to live in Forest Cove, so I have some opinion on it. On Canwood, we'd use it all the time, like to go to Trader Joe's, sometimes to go to the gas station. I don't live there anymore, but I think it was an access to Canaan that we used all the time. Now, regarding roadside, I was fine with it being closed. You just kind of rerouted traffic. It didn't impact me as much. I'm not sure how the businesses would feel about it. And then regarding the bike lanes, I love that idea. Like, I have kids. I'd like to go biking more, and oftentimes we don't, just because it sort of feels hazardous being on the road. And if you create those bike lanes on Canaan and make it more, it's always hazardous crossing the freeways. But I feel like if it's an option, like, people will use it, with caution with their kids as well. It's right now it's not feasible. So, and I think my son might have an opinion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and also there's evidence of it from traffic being protected from the bike lanes. It's used in the Netherlands, even though it's a million miles away, and it has worked. Like, I've seen pictures, like, every few feet there's a bike. It's very common there.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Elliot Schnoth.
Thank you very much, Elliot.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'll close the public hearing again then. And there's no specific action is required by the City Council. We'll now move on to the next item. Our next item is a discussion of requests to allow more flexibility for the Las Virgenes Malibu Council of Governments governing board members to vote on regional legislative items. I will now defer to the City Manager, Nate Hamburger, for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Ensign and Honorable Council. At the January 2023 meeting of the Las Virgenes Malibu Council of Governments, also referred to as the COG, a request was made by Board President Cole that COG members have the ability to vote on legislative matters that come before the COG. And so this is being brought back at their request. Typically, what has been done at council direction discuss this evening would be to utilize our legislative platform, which I think we have found to be successful in getting all of the council to agree on what items we would support or oppose, and then that allows staff to then immediately react and write letters of support or other items that may come forward for us. If that's something that the council would like to consider and give that direction, what would occur is myself or staff would sit down with the COG representative prior to any meeting, look at any legislative items that are proposed, and make sure that those match up with the approved legislative platform. So with that, I'd like to turn over to you for any questions or discussion, and then if you could provide direction to staff and the COG representative this evening, it'd be appreciated.
Thank you. Before we move on to public comment, does any council member have questions of the city manager? I'll start on this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, having been presented with this at the COG, I didn't feel comfortable agreeing to it until I discussed it with all of my fellow council members.
Thank you.
And we thank you for that. We really do.
Anybody else have any comments? Councilmember Lopez?
Has the COG ever taken steps to write their own legislative proposal that the cities could vote on?
Yes, several years ago, pre-COVID, I know there was an initial discussion for the COG to try to establish a legislative platform. At that time, not all of the cities had one, and there wasn't consensus from the 5 cities to agree to move forward at that point, and so the issue pretty much died. And that's about the time when our city updated ours. I think it was 2021 was the last update, but the COG was unable to get agreement from all of the member cities.
Any other questions, Council?
Is this time for questions or for comments?
For, I guess, questions.
Okay, so no, sorry.
Okay, no problem. All right. Written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you. No written public comments have been received. No speaker cards have been submitted. I'll defer to staff for any remote participants. Amber?
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. Does any council member have any further questions before we move into deliberations? We'll now move into deliberations. I'll start on this end again. Councilmember Sylvester. How about Councilmember Sylvester's?
No, I'm just waiting for direction from my fellow council members.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like the staff's recommendation. I think that's right in line with what I would feel comfortable with. This all came about with the Camp Kirkpatrick, and I just would want, and I completely trust all 5 of us, if we're at the COG, that if something comes up and it's not legislative, that, you know, you just get up and say, I need a minute, and you pull the city manager aside and you talk about it, and our city manager, who's at all those meetings, or our assistant city manager, they're just going to be a really good compass. If they feel uncomfortable, they will tell you, you're going to have to abstain from this. And if our legislative platform, I think, is a masterpiece, and it just covers so much great stuff, everything we care about, so that it gives our staff the ability to jump ahead. And I think that the COG, it would be useful for the COG to be able to jump ahead and, you know, vote on, because it's very frustrating. We'd go, okay, we all support this bill, but we all have to go back to our councils first. And by then the bill was gone, you know, or there was no impact by then. So I think this is a good move for the COG. I would just, you know, again, and I think Mr. Hamburger already said that he would sit down, or, you know, remotely, or have a call, you know, if there's anything on the agenda that you feel is not within the legislative platform, and, you know, maybe an issue that would have to come before the council. It doesn't happen that often from the times I've been on the COG. It's very rare where something comes up that the COG is being asked to take a position on something that's, you know, more or less left field for the COG. So I think you'll know when it's coming. But so that's how I think I support it.
Councilmember Wolf.
Great, thank you. So I've been involved with the COG for about the last 7 years, and so I'm really familiar with the process. And I think it is important for them to be able to act quickly, especially regarding state legislation that affects the region. And combining our voice makes us more powerful than one city. And I'd say about 95 to 99% of the time, we have shared interests regarding local control, housing issues, emergency preparedness, and looking through our legislative platform, it really does cover most of that. I also trust and appreciate having City Manager Hamburger in contact with the COG to see if there are any major issues coming forward that we would want to know about before to bring back to the council. But I do think that it is important that we are able to be nimble with the COG and move quickly to support or oppose legislation, especially because it's so timely with how much is coming from at the state level. So I support the recommendation from staff, and I look forward to working with the council regarding these issues on the COG. Thank you.
Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. I agree that our legislative platform is a masterpiece. I mean, we put in a lot of time, particularly Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber and our former council member Linda Northrup, I mean, really tweaked it. So, I mean, really, ideally, I think the COG should have its own legislative platform that all 5 cities have seen and that all 5 cities agree upon. And just to Councilmember Wolf's point, you know, last year in the state legislature, there were, I don't even know how many bills at the end of the year that, like, these climate bills were being thrown out at the last second, changing, gut and amend. There's all of these crazy things that happen on the state level at the last minute that sometimes you don't have time. And in fact, the Clean Power Alliance just passed its own legislative platform so that it doesn't even have to go to the board, so that our executive director has the authority himself with staff to go and make take a position based on the legislative platform that our whole board, you know, kind of like us. I mean, it doesn't come to the council, it's signed by the mayor, and we've all approved it. So, you know, for the short term, look, if they want to use our legislative, if we only weigh in because it matches our legislative platform, that works for me because that's like the least common denominator and it's a fantastic document. But I would highly suggest that for the long term, they create their own. And if they want it, they don't need to recreate the wheel. I mean, they can take ours and expand it so that it's, you know, relevant regionally and not just citywide. You know, there's no plagiarism, no copyright infringement. You know, we're all on the same page for the most part. So, you know, happy to agree with staff's recommendation that if it's within our platform and with the discussion with the city manager and our representative, fine, go ahead and take that vote because we know, you know, that we are on board with that, but for the long term, highly recommend they create their own. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lopez. I think you summarized the issue pretty well, and I think that our legislative agenda is meant to, our legislative platform is meant to basically give the guidance, and I think it provides a pretty good guidance, and along with the city manager conference, I think that you can get a pretty good idea of what should be approved and what shouldn't based on that. So I'm ready to move forward with staff recommendation as well. So I will now call for a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation. Will the maker of the motion and the second please state your names?
Well, Councilmember Sylvester is going to make a motion to approve flexibility for the Las Virgenes Malibu Council of Governments Governing Board members to vote on regional legislative items.
Councilmember Buckley Weber seconds the motion.
Thank you. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you. Are there any comments from staff? All right, all right. Are there any comments from the city council? Anybody? Oh, Councilmember Lesser, sure.
Okay, this is the fun part for me. So I was quite busy. And also, Councilmember Wolf, we attended the New Mayors and Council Members Academy, which told us how to behave, so I hope we're doing a good job now. I hope you'll approve of us. And I went, if anybody's interested in musicals, there was a wonderful musical put on by Lindiera Canyon Middle School, Annie. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I encourage you in the future to go to those. It's like going to professional theater. I was blown away by their performances. It was really good. I attended the City Blood Drive because now I'm no longer mad cow. I can donate my blood. Yes, they've changed that. So I did that. And then we all attended the P22 celebration, which was very moving and lovely. And then finally, I went on the recycling facility tour with Lewis, which we had, and also Ramiro, we had a great day. I learned a lot. And I'd just like to say, if anybody's listening at this point, because everybody says to me, why do we have to now bag our food waste and not just dump it into the green waste? And the reason is because when it gets to the recycling center, they separate the food waste from the green waste, because the green waste is composted, but all the food waste, they have to take it and put it in these amazing bins, and they compress it down, and this sort of black, juicy stuff comes out that's used as intense fertilizer. And that's why they don't want them to mix in our bins. Okay. Ideally, there would be a separate bin just for food, but obviously it's too much, too many bins. So that is why they now want us to bag our food. And also, compostable plastic bags are not compostable. They said that's a myth. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Great report. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I just wanted to, for anybody who's watching remotely to this meeting, last weekend I ran into a woman, her name is April, and she one day, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, came into council chambers, stood up at the mic on matters not on the agenda and said, I'm wondering if the city of Agoura Hills is going to have a climate action plan. And she said, because I really think it would be a good idea. I'd never seen her before, never met her. And so Kimberly got her contact information. And it was like, that sounds like something I'd like. And she introduced me to someone who had worked on one in Encinitas. And now here we are in 2023. And I just saw her last weekend. And I said, oh my God, we have a climate action and adaptation plan. We're just working on the implementation, the adaptation part of it, and she was very, very excited. She pretty much knew that things were, progressing along, but it just goes to show you that one person can make a difference. She came in, it was something that she felt strongly enough to come in and speak to matters not on the agenda. I hadn't seen her before that. I hadn't seen her really after that in terms of, coming in matters not on the agenda, and so don't hesitate, public. Come on in. We want to hear from you. So you never know how that's going to turn out. And we are all very proud of our climate action and adaptation plan. So, it's a good thing.
You got it. Thank you for those comments. Any other comments? All right. I also want to know, I actually know April, and I don't want to say her last name just because I don't want to either embarrass her. I haven't got permission to talk about it, but I think she's fantastic, and she was very much. I think she actually had gardens in front of her house with zero landscape before it was a thing, which now it is a thing, and so she was kind of on the front leading edge of all the environmental movement, so I think it's great. So I think those are my only comments. The next regular city council meeting is scheduled for 6 p.m. on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023 in the council chambers of the Civic Center. It is anticipated that members of the public will have the opportunity to participate in person in the council chambers or by remote video conferencing Zoom. At this time, we will adjourn tonight's meeting. Will the maker of the motion and a second to adjourn please state your names?
I move to adjourn the meeting, tonight's meeting. This is Deborah Klein Lopez.
Thank you. Second?
Councilmember Buckley Weber seconds the motion.
Thank you. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez.
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester.
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. All righty.